It's Friday night again, and welcome to Friday Night Primetime here on RaceSpotTV. Whether it's Friday night, Friday evening, Friday afternoon, or Friday morning for you, it's all going to be the same here. Monza, the Autodromo Nazionale Monza to be specific. We're back in Italy. We've got a French car with the Renault Clio Cup here on Friday Night Primetime this week. Pretty simple setup here, 15-minute timed races, sprints to the finish, and some of the best Clio drivers on this service. It's one of iRacing's newest cars, and I think quite a few of us have been having more fun with this car than any. Let's take a look at the schedule here. For the past couple of weeks, we've been going to some pretty stereotypical tracks for some of these new cars. Spa, of course, what better place to open the season than Okayama, one of the shorter track, or one of the free tracks on the service. Then off to Monza here, high speeds. It's going to be a road course pack race of sorts here. Next week at VIR should be a little bit different. The Monza of America, you might be able to call it. Then, of course, the new circuit at Jerez, Tsukuba, Laguna Seca, Red Bull Ring, Rudskogen, Lime Rock, Oulton Park, and Summit Point. 12 weeks of Clio Cup fixed action here on RaceSpotTV, and I don't know about you, Arjuna, but I look at every track on this schedule, and I think I kind of want to get in this car around there. It looks like a lot of fun.
I don't know if I want to get in the car. The one thing that I know for sure is I want to be watching for all of this. Already 2 rounds in the books, and it's been blockbuster action here on RaceSpotTV that, unfortunately, the two of us haven't gotten to commentate much over. A couple of other guys have had the fun of talking about all of this, but with 2 rounds in the books already, of course, championship standings starting to shake on up.
Yeah, Danny Martin currently leads the Drivers' Championship here over Erwin Lucas Liszkiewicz. Victor Gonzalez, third, Miguel Castro and Kevin Beckman. Then Javier Soto, Jack Wilson, Christoph Malashewski, David Morales-Galan, and Javier Sanchez. Notice one name on there who you don't see, Valentin Bonny, who won the race last week at Okayama, has not been a competitor in both of the rounds. I don't see him in the field tonight, so he may have gotten 1 win down in the season, but he's going to have to keep showing up on Friday nights if he wants to win our Friday Night Primetime Championship here. This is, of course, an official series on iRacing, so points are determined that way, but it is this specific time slot here at 7 p.m. in whatever we're going to call it, the official time, the UTC time. That is when this Friday Night Primetime split officially happens. Track temps looking pretty hot here in Italy. It's the middle of spring, the 1st of May here in Virtual Standard Time. We've got a nice little watermelon Clio here. That's not Ross Chastain. Are we going to see similar speed through the Parabolica?
Ross Chastain probably would be on the oval configuration, if we're being honest here at
true.
Monza. Especially given that eNASCAR is going there, I think, later this year. Very curious to see how that's going to go. Drivers will get a second qualifying attempt as well, so it's not all just about lap number 1. Be very curious to see what the times will shake up. Look at how they're trying to minimize the distance on the run to the line.
Doya Weird up to pole for the moment, but you can see everything is coming down. First couple of laps on the board, and no real surprise that Erwin Liszkiewicz on pole for the moment by 0.7 of a second. It's an absolutely massive gap for the moment. Here comes Loic Barb to the line. It's looking like a not very representative lap for him. He'll get one more time around here. Francisco Castillo crosses the line. Still about a second off of Liszkiewicz. We're seeing these big gaps in qualifying, Arjuna, and that might be a little bit worrying, but we do have to remember, it's Monza. It's mostly straight lines. These are very low-powered cars. You could be as far ahead as you want in qualifying, but it's going to be very, very difficult to break the draft.
Did someone say draft party in here, or am I just assuming things?
I'll say it right now, draft party.
I would not be surprised, though, to be fair, if Liszkiewicz is able to break away from the rest at the very front, as he bails on now his second qualifying attempt, actually. So he pushed the limits of the track here at Monza just that little bit too much. If those behind your leader start to fight, it will present the opportunity for a driver with 7,200 I rating to try and run away.
Well, Arjuna, he has 7,199, so he's not quite there, but after
I
today,
rounded up.
After today, he'll get to 7,200. He'll cross over that limit there. Thomas Viome crosses the line, puts himself third as well. JB Masita, a good qualifying lap time for him as well in second. 16 cars here in top split. Benjamin Furch is the last of them all, currently P11 and 11th, or 16th rather. 1895 iRating, so that goes to show you the bottom car in this top split. Strength of field, very, very strong here. Less strong than it was in week 1. It has come down just a little bit as some of the top drivers have gone other ways, but still, this new car on iRacing is attracting all sorts of incredible talent, and we've seen some pretty incredible racing over the past couple of weeks. As here comes Alex Rogers, 4-car in the split here in a highlighter yellow or Grello-nosed Clio. I'm always biased towards that. It's going to be a 212.4 for him, crosses the line and puts MP3.
A quadrant sponsored car apparently, so maybe
Yeah.
Lando Norris is watching on from somewhere as Francisco Diaz is unable to improve, but Gasparoni and Augustus Grimbergers, they got up inside of your front 4 rows or so as we're going to get the final couple of cars across the line.
Just instantly slamming on the brakes the second they cross the line. Nobody wants any extra time around Monza. Here comes Loic Barb, across the line, does not improve very much, still going to be P8 for him. Thomas Viome has one more chance around here in that that easily differentiable car, I think, because it is just blank white. Everybody else has kind of gone all out with their paint schemes here, but Thomas Viome blank white with a couple of red lines. That's going to be easy to pick him out from the pack.
It's the Italian speed police is, I think, what he's trying to be right here. Although, having said that, with 10 seconds left, I don't think he's going to get a chance to finish this lap in qualifying. SNCF, that seems like maybe a French speed police, I don't know.
SNCF, I just looked it up, as apparently the Société Nationale des Chemins de Fer Français, which is France's state-owned railway company.
Oh!
So, I mean, he will be part of a train here.
Yeah, Paul Smith loves a good old train.
Yeah, Paul Smith, if you're tuning in, I bet he can give us all sorts of SNCF facts. You know, the French love their trains. But at the head of the train, it is Erwin Lischkowitz from Central to Eastern Europe. It's a very European top split here today. JB Masita of France starts alongside him, and that's Alex Rogers and the SNCF's Thomas Viome on the second row. Francisco Castilla-Falder on row number 3 alongside Axel Guzmel. And 7th place went to Luca Gasparoni at his home race in Italy. Then it's Loic Barb in P8. Gustus Grinbergus, a driver with real-life and sim racing experience, starts alongside Glenn Van Doyeweerd, Francisco Martin Diaz, and Benjamin Forch bring us down to 12th. Unlucky 13th went to Darren Brown alongside Francisco Cardenas Ruiz. That's a lot of Franciscos in this split. And the final row, Eric Menenfeld and good old Connor Murphy. 16 cars in top split. Every single one of them from Europe, if I do count correctly. So Friday Night Primetime Split is organized around UTC in Europe, so it's understandable to see quite the international field here. But from Poland to France to Italy to the UK, it is a pan-European field, and everybody's going to be looking at that watermelon on the front row.
Absolutely. A lot of people may not remember, but Prime time started not just with Friday night, but some extra racing as well. But we're focused again on another Friday action here at Monza.
Waiting for the lights to go out here at Monza. It's the watermelon man, Erwin Lischkowitz, on the front row. The lights are out here at Monza, and we're racing for Friday night prime time on week 3. It's a great start from Lischkowitz. Remember, these cars are front-wheel drive. So you've got to make sure to get that launch right with these low-horsepower cars. And now how can Lischkowitz break away? It's going to be side-by-side into turn 1 between Masita and Rogers. Rogers backs out of it to let Masita get into the train. Here we go through turn 1 for the first time.
Safely through as well. A couple of cars running wide, but not onto the gravel, and it's single file inside of the top 10, and now running themselves into the second of the chicane. The reality is, I don't think you necessarily want to lead coming on to the final lap of the race, but when will you want to make your move? Drivers have what will be effectively, I think, 7 laps to figure it all out.
Single file back to 5th for the moment, but under braking into the Variante della Roggia for the first time. Is anybody going to think about a dive further back in the field? No, they're not. I think everybody's being very, very smart right now, other than literally for last. Everybody knows that it might be a little bit too early to try and break the train, and going side by side might be what loses you the draft.
Can already see a bit of separation building between 8th and 9th positions because Gustas Grinbergers has gotten past the number 14 machine to work his way on forward, but you can see a car slowing down and side by side off of Lesmo too. Not what you want to see on a climb up towards Ascari as the front 5 start to break away.
The question will be who can get the best exit out of Ascari. You know when Lišković is getting 7/10 over the field in qualifying. He's found another gear in this car, but draft range goes back about a second, so it's going to be very, very difficult to lose him if you are JB Mesita. But you see the gap expanding out of Ascari, 6/10 of a second. And here comes Alex Rogers peeking to the outside of Mesita. Are they going to start fighting for second?
Got to be careful through the Parabolica not to get pinched too tight to the inside, and Mesita fortunate that Rogers is going to allow him to sweep back on in behind Gusamel with a lunge to the inside of Villome, excuse me, and they're now going to be locked in horns. Who gets the draft, though, on the very long run back down to the first chicane?
This is going to be an interesting experiment here as we cross the line to end lap number 1. How far can JB Mesita get in the draft here? He came down the front straight about 6/10 behind. How close can he get once we get into braking into turn 1? You can see a little bit of tandem drafting a little bit further back in the pack. Drivers just desperately trying to stay in this train here. Some are electing to use the old bumper, NASCAR style.
Gusamel gets in front of Villome as they get through the braking zone, but already now 1 second separated from those in front. Mesita didn't really close within 7/10 of Lišković on the power down phase out of that first chicane, and already I did say if Lišković gets the opportunity, he'll be allowed to break away. Mesita and Rogers working together to not let that happen.
Still very early days, but it's kind of looking like the draft isn't as powerful as we thought. And in open wheel cars around Monza, you can bring that gap down very, very effectively on the straights here. But with about a 7/10 gap, it seems like Mesita in second's a little bit stuck.
We managed to get through turn 1 safely on the opening lap of the race. I don't think lap 2 was necessarily as tidy. I think they went 3 wide for a moment, and the big loser in that situation was Francisco Ruiz, who was dropped to the very tail end of the field now. Biggest loser overall, though, is Francisco Fulder, who's lost 7 spots so far. Standing starts, long run into turn number 1. I think some were a little bit more cautious than others, and Fulder maybe trying to ensure he had no damage to start this race off.
Like the old Killers song said, some people did exercise caution, but yeah, one of the Franciscos has lost out there a little bit later. I think the third of the Franciscos is currently side by side with Gustas Grinbergus through Ascari right now, arguing over P8. There's that little hornet's nest with Darren Brown behind. He's not the magician, Darren Brown, and no magic could get him out of the gravel there. It was a good save, though. Ooh,
and now that's Fulder drifting onto the grass by himself. As they were 3 wide for a moment, and he's just trying to hold on for a moment.
Parabolica. They got over it, they got through it. Francisco Castilla-Falder latest on the brakes. Darren Brown's going to get ahead of Francisco Martin. That's got to be a record on RaceSpot. Have we ever had 3 Franciscos in the same race?
I think if you go back to maybe some of our endurance races, yes, but those have hundreds of drivers. We have just 16 in this field.
I'm going to get a San Francisco reference in there somehow. I'll have to work that in the next 10 minutes because this race is flying by. Only 2 laps on the board, and we're already a third of the way through this race. We take a look a little bit further back ahead. Alex Rogers has been remarkably patient here behind JB Mesita as Connor Murphy ends up in the wall at turn 1. Francisco Cadenas Ruiz and Benjamin Forch involved as well. It was clean on lap 1, a little bit less clean on lap 2, and things have finally come to blows on lap 3 at turn 1.
I get the sense that maybe it is time to turn our attention to the RaceSpotTV replay machine, which typically does not miss much. And so we'll start on the opening lap of the race. That's 3 wide as Fulder, maybe with a slowdown penalty, so Gustas Grimberger send it not just to the outside and off the track, but all the way around Lesmo 2 as well.
Definitely going to get an off track for that, so his safety rating might be struggling a little bit, but not going to get a slowdown for going that wide. It does still count as a pass. Let's see what happened into turn 1 here. That's Darren Brown leading the train, and then behind him, as everybody checks up, does everybody get into each other into turn 1? Not yet. Everybody's fine, but there goes the Clio up over the sausage curbs, cutting the track, and that'll be a slowdown.
And then on the next lap in towards turn number 1, we've got, whoa, that's a bit of a clumsy mix-up there between Francisco Diaz, who then pulls off to the left, and Connor Murphy, who we saw stricken off on the left-hand side as well. And so that's a little bit of a cycle through of what we've seen so far today.
I always love to see that that little chicane in the middle of the track used, because you see the F1 drivers go through there with very little paint. Seems very easy to make those chicanes, but the second you get into a car with a slightly more difficult turning circle, it's a lot tighter than you think to get through there without taking styrofoam with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's not forget these are front-wheel drive cars as well, and so they're really trying to just get straight and get onto the power as much as possible. You've got Lišković net is only half a second clear of JB Mesida in the Team Mad car. So again, Paul Smith not just happy because there's some train talk going on RaceSpotTV because he's got a teammate running up in second. Alex Rogers hasn't really been able to close that much at the very front of the field. They've been quite restrained compared to the fighting on the very fringes of the top 10.
Francisco Castilla inventing his own track there over to the left side of your screen. I think he may have had a slowdown penalty as he lets Darren Brown and Gustus Grinbergus through side by side into turn 1. You can tell Grinbergus is getting very, very aggressive right now. I think he's, even from lap 1, with that little bit of an off that we saw from him, he's been getting aggressive since the drop of this green flag. He doesn't want to be 9th right now. The number 2 car, 7 spots below where he should be, technically.
Yeah, no, this is... it's what happens when you're stuck back in qualifying, and if you're not able to make the most on the start. It's already halfway through this race as well. Let's not forget 15-minute time to fair. And while they fight outside of the top 10, Gasparoni jumps in front of Loic Barb, who I think did, in fact, get a slowdown through that second chicane.
How about Luca Gasparoni? Home race for him. I'm sure he was very happy when he saw the schedule release that we were going to Monza this week. He's been doing a great job. He's up a couple of spots since qualifying, 6 spots above his number in the session. He's been doing a great job pulling away. Loic Barb has finally served his slowdown, though. He'll be back on the pace, but let's see how he got it in the first place. Into the Variante della Roggia, hops the curb, hops the second curb.
It was on the first part. It was
way
too early on the turn-in, and so he instantly pulls to the side in the Cube Controls sponsored car and rolls his way through Ascari, now almost 3 seconds separated from Villaume, who's in a land of his own effectively right now in 5th. It might be the bridge between himself and those behind as they try and latch back onto those at the very front.
You definitely don't want to be on your own here because, for one, it's Monza. You're just doing a lot of straight line driving here on full throttle, so it's not going to be the most fun in the world when you're all on your lonesome. But what is going to be pretty fun here is JB Mesida has continued to close this gap. Whether this is just getting more comfortable in the car in race conditions, I don't know. But he has brought that gap down to Lišković, and he is right there. He thinks about a dive into turn 1, just takes a little peek of a nose to the inside of the watermelon machine. Doesn't go for it yet, but he's letting Irwin know, I'm here. I found the speed. This is not a one-car fight.
And hopefully does not break the watermelon. I know Ross Chastain likes to do that after winning. You got to make sure you do it afterwards. It's one of those tracks as well where even though there are plenty of drafting opportunities, there are only a couple where realistically you want to try and go for the move. Not be shocked if Mesida again is content to ride around in second until maybe with 1 or rather 2 laps to go, which will be the next time by, I think, given that we are running lap times of 2 minutes and 12 seconds, give or take. I expect that you'll start to see Mesida looking a little bit more aggressive when we come to the line next time by.
Very curious about the watermelons they have in Poland, because that can go one of 2 ways. You know, they're very good with their produce in Poland, where Erwin Lišković hails from. They love their potatoes and their root vegetables, but is that soil good for watermelons? That may be something we have to ask him if he shows up here after after tonight, because this is a very powerful watermelon.
Yeah, well, we're going to ask the hard-hitting questions here on RaceSpotTV.
Yeah.
Get into the science behind the soil, I guess.
That's why people come to RaceSpot. Polish watermelon soil.
It's not RaceSpotTV, it's RaceSo.TV now, though. Or RaceCropTV. What are we thinking?
I like RaceSpot.TV. RaceSpot.TV.
I like CropSpot.
CropSpot, that works too.
But that's the name for our farming simulator esports channel, I thought.
I mean, that is the thing. You know, the Germans love their farming simulator. We could get in on that.
Do you know what the most amusing, or rather confusing, esport is in the world?
No.
Really? Have you never heard of the most competitive esports? In fact, maybe most competitive competition in the world. It's called Microsoft Excel Esports.
Okay, I do know.
Okay,
about
good.
That. That's some nuclear stuff. But here we go, Mesida. He's got some spreadsheets in his mind right now, trying to organize this from A to Z. He's going to flip the conditional formatting to put him in front of Lišković. Not going to happen into turn 1 this time, though. We took 2 laps to go at the line that time, so he is running out of time. Right now, he's got to think, when and where can I go for this move? How can I continue to close this down? How can I get a better run through the draft? He's got that to worry about. Alex Rogers has more pressing things to worry about as Axel Gusmel gets to his outside through the Curva Grande. As these two battle side by side, they intentionally give up a chance of fighting for the win unless the two up front take each other out. But right now, Axel's not worried about that. He's thinking, you know, Alex, your name's an anagram of mine, and I'm going to take your position.
I get the sense that Rogers had a mistake out of turns 1 and 2, and that really compromised him, allowed Gusmel the opportunity. In the flash of the lights, I think the expression of frustration from the quadrant liveried car that, you know, we could have had a chance to fight for the lead, but now we're really just fighting for third.
Loic Barb and Luca Gasparoni back together. Loic was able to remake that move after Luca got ahead after his slowdown, but it's going to be very close into Ascari. You got one of the longest straights on the track here, and you're not going to be able to avoid the pink intimidator of Luca Gasparoni in that beautiful bright magenta car. He should be able to go for a dive into Ascari, but up front again, you can see how close Masita is. This is the closest he's been through Ascari. It's going to be the white flag this time around, one more time around. Masita needs to be close out of the Parabolica to go for a move into turn 1.
He's close enough, though, that with 1 lap to go, we know we're in for a fight. Did he notice the touch that we've got with the watermelon? It's not just in outside the car, rather. It's in the car as well. Mario's behind the wheel and surely has some banana peels ready to throw out.
That is very relevant. Is that the home touch here at Monza that's going to help Erwin Liszkiewicz manage to steal this victory? It's going to be the white flag for him, but you can see Masita is as close as he's ever been. Liszkiewicz tried to do the snake down the front straight for a moment to break the draft, but he's decided that's just slowing him down too much. Here comes Masita. Is he going to put a bump draft to Liszkiewicz? He's not. He pulls to the outside. A little bit of contact in the braking zone. Who's going to be later on the brakes into turn 1? It's Masita, but can he hold it around the outside? No, he can. He hops the curbs. That's going to be a slowdown for Masita. And that may have just solidified the win for Liszkiewicz as he goes on by.
But now guess who's closing? Gusmel has been able to drop Alex Rogers, who may have had a slowdown penalty of his own because he's now defending from Thomas Villaume in that number 8 machine. Liszkiewicz has a 7/10 or so margin at the very front. Likely to be enough, you'd have to think. We haven't seen too many desperation sends into the Parabolica, the very final corner here at Monza, but Gusmel running out of distance to be able to close up to the bumper.
This is the ultimate test for Gusmel now. We know Masita had the pace to stick with Liszkiewicz, but Axel Gusmel qualified deeper in the field, has been making passes all day, did not have the pace for Liszkiewicz in qualifying, and suddenly has to find 0.6 of a second here on the final lap through the final Lesmo. It's not a great exit out of Gusmel. I think he needs to hope for a mistake out of Liszkiewicz into Ascari.
I think it's done and dusted. After what was an amazing gap in qualifying from Liszkiewicz, I wondered if he was going to be able to break away. It wasn't that easy. He's been forced to fight for it throughout the entirety of the race, and despite the fact that he's been towing around those behind, fastest lap still sits with the number 1, who is about to have the perfect race here at Monza.
Has been absolutely perfect. While Masita had a chance, he had the speed, was just a little bit too late in the brakes and hops the curb. And he's going to fall to third here, most likely. Through the Parabolica for the final time. The watermelon of Erwin Liszkiewicz takes to the final corner. He's got a comfortable gap over Axel Gusmel. And through the final corner, the driver who was 7/10 ahead of the field in qualifying has absolutely maintained control of the field in the race. The Polish Watermelon Council rejoices as the watermelon crawl for Erwin Liszkiewicz gives him his first Friday night primetime win of the season.
What a drive as well. These cars have put on a really exciting showcase so far to start this season off, but Liszkiewicz with a dominating performance at the very front, never looked too perturbed, and he announces that it's me, Erwin, victorious at Monza.
And there is the traditional Clio celebration. You can just barely see it on the left side of your screen there. It's the front-wheel drive reverse donuts.
I mean, there's an attempt being made, I guess.
I mean, this might just be the watermelon crawl. That is that's a very American reference for people, but that might be the victory celebration if he comes back with us for the next couple weeks. But here are your finishing results here. A similar gap that Liszkiewicz had over the field in qualifying over Axel Gusmel, who drives up to finish second. JB Mesita had a shot at the win, threw everything at it into turn 1, but was just a little bit too late in the brakes. He'll come home with a podium. Alex Rogers finishes ahead of Thomas Viome, and then Luca Gasparoni in his home race brings it home in P6. Loic Barbe did eventually lose that position once more, and Gustus Grinbergus going to be disappointed with an 8th place here. Glenn Van Doyeweer, didn't talk about him much. He finishes 9th ahead of Francisco Castilla, the lead Francisco, ahead of P11, which was Darren Brown, not the magician. Benjamin Furch finishes 12th ahead of Eric Menintfeld. Then it's Francisco Cadenas Ruiz, Francisco Martin Diaz, the other two Franciscos, and poor old Connor Murphy didn't get a lap in qualifying, started at the back of the field. Unfortunately for him, finishes at the back of the train as well. But that's 16 cars that came in here, 16 cars that finished. We had quite an exciting race up front, didn't we?
It was entertaining. Monza, you know, the temple of speed. A lot of people have high expectations for what that means, but I'll be honest, it's not always the most blockbuster of a show. It requires racecraft to work your way on forward, and it was really interesting just to see how JB Mesita tried and piled on the pressure into the closing stages, and then maybe broke himself with that slight slip up into turn number 1.
We'll take a look at the schedule here while we can, and next week, that's going to be one to circle, because Monza it's pretty straightforward. It's straight lines and it's braking zones, but at VIR, there's a couple of those. There's a couple of straight lines, there's a couple of braking zones, but it is one of the most difficult tracks in the world, let alone just in the United States. And that's going to be a whole nother challenge for these Clio drivers next week.
It's the American version of the Nordschleife, not just because it's got so many different layouts that you can kind of work your way through as well, but it really feels old school, tough in its nature and unforgiving and unrelenting. Rest in peace to the tree. I'm very sad that it now no longer will live on in the virtual world. VIR has always been one of my favorites, and in these cars in particular, knowing that you can't go side by side through plenty of these complexes, opportunities, as few and far between as they may be, will have to be taken.
You did just remind me, this is going to be my first VIR broadcast without the oak tree.
Oh, so now I'm sad again.
It's a historic day, but it was a historic day here at Monza with the Watermelon car winning, but it's about time to rind it down here. Erwin Liszkiewicz victorious in the Renault Clio Cup fixed here at RaceSpot's Friday night primetime. We'll see you next week at VIR, but for now, I've been Joey Tebben. Our producer and co-commentator has been Arjuna Kankapati. Thank you for tuning in here with us, and until we see you next time, so long.